Hey G-Fans, GojiFan93 here, and today I'm going to be reviewing Godzilla Voxel Wars. So, Godzilla Voxel Wars. This one was definitely a surprise for us G-Fans, wasn't it? We weren't really expecting this game, and it wasn't until a few months ago when Toho announced this game and it just popped out of nowhere. And then a few months later, actually it was October 31st is when the game actually released, even though on Steam it said a lot of the time that it was going to be released in November. And even though I was very hesitant on the game, I jumped on it day one and actually put out my first Let's Play on the day it released. And I gotta be honest, it was a really fun game, and I was sort of surprised at how good it was. Now, it's not the game that I think myself and a lot of other Godzilla fans wanted, but it wasn't actually as bad, and it definitely wasn't as bad as the Kong game we got this year. But that's not to say that this game is perfect, because it is far from being perfect. So what is Godzilla Voxel Wars? Well, Godzilla Voxel Wars is basically a puzzle strategy game. That's sort of how they marketed the game, and that's very true to what it is. This game will have you go through many different stages with a puzzle that you have to solve, but in doing that, you have to have a strategy to get there. And I'll get later into the nitty-gritty when we get to the gameplay of it. But first, when it comes to the story of the game, I really can't tell you much because halfway through the game, I sort of lost interest on really what the narrative was in the game. All I can really say is that it's a child that has these little Godzilla figurines and he's creating his own little story. Sort of like Godzilla's Revenge with Ichiro and basically imagining all of this going on and these monsters fighting. And in the story, or quote-unquote story, the new enemy of this game is actually these like mushroom fungus type of enemies, and you'll be fighting these guys throughout the game, with many different forms for sure. The game's length is pretty much 6 stages, and there's 20 levels within each of those stages. So it's a fairly lengthy game. I'm pretty sure overall the game took me about 6 to 7 hours to complete. So that's pretty much with the story out of the way. The next thing I want to talk about is actually the overall presentation. When the game was first announced and they had that first trailer for it, I was definitely not impressed. I was like, oh my gosh, another chibi-like Godzilla game, but this time it has like a Minecraft like style to it, and it's blocky and it's like kid-friendly looking and all this. It did not impress me. But actually getting my hands on the game and playing through it, it makes sense, and the game's presentation and the way that it looks fits the overall tone, I feel, of the game. The thing I like about it is that the characters themselves, they're really, they're pretty static in a way, but I like how when, you hop around each little block or whatever, there's, they're just hopping around, little smoke puffs, happen every time they hit the floor, and there's like different effects going on here and there. Even in the stages themselves, there are certain like weather effects or whatnot. I think like it was either the second or third stage, there was like some rain that was happening too, which was kind of cool. To be honest, I was actually impressed with the presentation. It looked great. It was like high quality. Again, not like the Kong game where the quality was really not there. This game was at least polished. It knew the art direction that it wanted to take, and it went full force in there, and it was very polished and did look good. Now granted, I'm still not a full fan of the art style. I do wish we had a more realistic look or something like that, but I understand that it might not have fit the tone that this game was going for. Also, the game ran very smooth. I only had I think one crash in the game, but I think that might have been due to OBS when I was recording. But overall, the game is smooth as butter. 60 frames per second, you could probably even get higher if your computer can run higher frame rates. But overall, there was no stuttering, it ran great, and also the controller support was really nice too. You can either play it with a controller or a mouse and keyboard. Actually, really just a mouse, that's right. The game pretty much only, you just need the mouse if you're just using a mouse instead of a controller. So, and to be honest, I started my playthrough with a controller, but I actually ended up moving into a mouse because it was just more precise and it's just easier to do the moves. So overall, presentation, really nice. I gotta say 10 out of 10 really when it comes to that. Now, let's move on to the gameplay of this. This is where the majority of the video is gonna take place. Now, the gameplay of this game, again, like I said, it's a puzzle strategy game. So with that, obviously, it's not like you're going to be beating up monsters and it's going to be this high intense action. It's actually a very slow pace, really make your brain work kind of game. And by me saying make your brain work, this game really makes you think. It's like playing a Rubik's Cube. Like, no joke, some of the stages, in fact, pretty much all of the levels are very, very intense puzzles. Now, I gotta preface this. I'm stupid. So, really when it comes to this game, the overall puzzle aspect of it can really be a detriment to the game or very rewarding, depending on how you look at it. I look at it as both ways. There are parts of the game that was, you feel really good for solving a certain part, but then there are other parts where I'm tearing my hair out going, oh my god, I hate this so much. But again, I can't blame the game for it being frustrating, because the game, the rules and everything that's laid out for it, it's not unfair. The game is never unfair to you. In fact, the game, it can be played 100% perfectly the whole way through. You just have to know the steps to take it. That can feel a little bit restricting though, I will be honest, but at the same time, it's a puzzle game. You have to solve the puzzle, and the way to solve the puzzle is a method, and that's what the developers have put forward. First off, the big thing is that you not only get to play as Godzilla. What's really cool is you get to play a wide variety of monsters that are in Godzilla's catalog. There's Godzilla, you get Rodan, Mothra, Mothra larva, they're like one of the early characters, also Anguirus. You get King Ghidorah, Hedorah, you get Destroya, Ibra, which was a surprise. I really did not expect Ibra to make an appearance in this game. And also Mechagodzilla, and Minya actually also makes an appearance in this game as well. And what I really like is that every character actually has their own abilities and attributes, sort of their own pros and cons that help in the game. I guess I should say their strengths and weaknesses. And what's really great is that Godzilla's sort of, he doesn't feel overpowered compared to the other characters. Every character has their class and their set abilities that are going to help you through the puzzles. Now, it's not like in each level you can pick whichever monster you want to do. No, the levels are pre-selected and pre-made in a way that, okay, you're going to have this these amount of characters that are going to be in it. Some of the levels you actually don't unlock any characters. Some of the levels you can't find any monsters. You're just going to have the monsters that are already placed on the map. Other levels, you're going to have the ability to, once you destroy certain buildings, you're going to be able to unlock them and then pull them out and use them in the board. So some levels you'll have the ability to use Rodan or King Ghidorah or a combination of how many ever, but there's no point where you can actually have however, you can't mess, because it would mess the game up. It would mess the mechanics that are set in that certain stage. So what's really cool is Godzilla, you got him, he's running around, basically have his fire breath attack, and that's really his moveset. Rodan has the ability where he can actually blow an enemy across the map, which is really useful. It can be useful for yourself to get to a certain place farther, or to push an enemy away. Anguirus' ability, he kind of rams the enemy, but it also takes the health away from him, so that's sort of his strength and weakness. Mothra, her ability is where she can actually shield an enemy, so she's sort of like a support class. She'll shoot a bubble around your character that makes you invincible for one turn. The Mothra larva, on the other hand, what she does is she actually shoots a web ball, and it literally hits a square and disperses in a horizontal, well, it disperses in a, I don't know really how to say it, but like in a straight line, depending on where you are on the map. Minya, he's also sort of a support class. What's really unique about Minya is that when you actually shoot your ring blast at whoever, it actually doubles your attack. So there's a lot of parts in the game where you'll hit a building that will take more than like 2 hits to attack. For instance, Godzilla, his breath attack can take out a building that takes 2 hits. But if there's a building that has a 3rd layer on it, it'll only take out 2. But if you have Minya and you get that power up from Minya, you'll be able to destroy that building in 1 hit. Ghidorah's attack is obviously his classic lightning beam, so, or I guess I should say his gravity beam. And what's cool about that is that his gravity beam, since he has 3 heads, he can actually attack the first 3 squares that are in front of him. And that can be really useful for clearing out a lot of enemies and also buildings that are in the way. And the game is very clever with how it does that, because there are certain parts on the map where you can clearly see it set up to use King Ghidorah at that part. Ibra has an attack where he can actually hit twice, so he hits 1 attack and then he'll do another attack. That can be useful for certain enemies and buildings. Mechagodzilla is pretty much showing his Showa outfit, so for this in particular incarnation he uses his finger missiles. The cool thing is that his finger missiles can shoot across the whole board. What it does also though is it pushes him back 1 square, so that's another strategy, unique ability to his set. Ghidorah, on the other hand, has an ability similar to Mothra where she shoots an egg in an arcing way, but instead of dispersing, what it does is he shoots out, garbage and it hits the ground and it actually leaves like a sludge area, like a toxic part, so that if an enemy or yourself walks on it, it takes a health point away. Destroya is one of the last characters that you can unlock, and Destroya basically has his oxygen destroyer beam, and what that does is it can actually attack 2 squares in front of him. And one of the cool things that I didn't even know, sometimes the game won't explain, actually before I get to that, the game actually does a really good job explaining how mechanics and character powers and all that stuff works in the game. The early stages, and actually every time you unlock a new monster, or you come across a new enemy type, because there's a bunch of different enemy types as well throughout the game that sort of mimic your monster's abilities too. They're kind of clones, but just on both sides. But the game does a very good job explaining the rules and how things work. But one thing the game didn't explain to me was that Anguirus actually can run over lava. So there was a part in the game where, I was so stuck I didn't know what to do, and then I used a hint ticket, and I'll get to those hint tickets later, but I used a hint ticket and it showed that Anguirus can just fly over the lava square, and I'm like, I didn't know he could do that, so that was, sort of a discovery on my part. And in the 6 stages, they have a variety of themes for them, and really it's sort of your, kind of like a Super Mario style, where you start out in like a very green, lush area, then sort of deserty type area, then a winter wonderland type area, more of a jungle area, and then like a lava area for like the last thing. So the themes are sort of generic and typical for a video game form, but to be honest, it's cool to see that in a Godzilla game. The main bulk of the gameplay involves turns. It's not a turn-based, well, I mean, technically it is a turn-based strategy game, but again, it's more leaning on that puzzle aspect and how you strategize on how to attack whatever puzzle is laid out in front of you. And the game has limited turns, so this is where the challenge comes into play. If you, for instance, some levels you have only 3 turns, and the less turns you make, like let's say the less amount of turns you take and the less amount of abilities you use, basically the bare minimum you use, which means the best player you are, you get 3 stars, and you're rated on how many points you get. And this obviously counts for the less amount of turns, less amount of usage of power, like the G powers where unlocking other monsters and stuff. And actually sometimes if you skip a turn, that actually counts towards getting more points. So sometimes it gets tricky where you have to make sure like, oh, maybe I don't need to actually use a monster in this turn, I'll just hit end turn, and it can actually gain you more points. The more points you get, you obviously get a rating. You get 1 to 3 stars, and sometimes if you get the max rate, you get a perfect rating, which is a perfect 3 stars. And when you get 3 stars, you get a hint ticket or a G ticket or whatever they call it. Now, these G tickets are the most valuable thing in this game. I can't tell you, I did not beat this game on my own brain, for sure. I heavily used these hint tickets all the time. What's interesting about the hint tickets is that it doesn't just show you how to beat the game or how to beat whatever turn you're on. It actually will play the stage for you, which is kind of weird. Like, it won't say, hey, do this and this. It'll actually just show you what that turn needs to look like to perfect it. And if you have enough G tickets to basically complete the whole thing, you can just spam the hint tickets for, okay, spam turn 1, spam turn 2, spam turn 3, and you actually get a perfect rating on that too. So, it's sort of a risk and reward on, do I want to use a hint ticket now? What I really didn't like about the hint ticket thing is how, if let's say you're on turn 1 and you actually knew what to do, like you did the right steps, right? So like, okay, I went to this building, destroyed it, and that was the first step, and I did that correctly. Well, the problem is now that I'm on step 2 or turn 2, if I'm lost and I need a hint, the hint ticket will only unlock the second step after I've unlocked the first step. So the game doesn't care if you already mastered the first turn, you still need to unlock the first turn's hint, if that makes sense. So sometimes it can really screw you over and you can end up wasting a ticket, which I wasted so many tickets because I basically knew what to do on the first turn, but then the other turns I was lost, but I had to use that first ticket. And the most frustrating thing is when you hit that first turn ticket and you see that you did the right thing, you're like, oh God, because I just wasted that ticket. That's basically the problem there. The thing that I sort of wish that the game did in terms of the turns is that I understand that it creates the challenge, and that's where the whole game comes from, is that, okay, you have to beat it in this amount of turns, but like sometimes the game will do this where, okay, you have to beat it in no less than 3 turns, you'll get 3 stars, but we'll give you a little bit of a buffer room where if you take 6 turns, that's okay, you just won't get any stars, right? You won't get any points. To me, though, there are points in the levels where it just becomes outrageous, where sometimes things just get out of control. In particular, when you get to these enemies that multiply, these are the worst enemies in the game, in my opinion, because they will continue to multiply every turn, and sometimes it can get so overwhelming and out of control in the game that my anxiety just goes through the roof and I don't know what to do. But I wish that the game allowed you to have an unlimited amount of turns just to play around with the map and just to have the monsters, move around and fight each other in a more casual way. And that'll be a perfect transition to talk about the dark levels. Oh my god, there's a whole other half of the game that isn't required to finish the main campaign, but it is an added challenge. And oh my god, I didn't even attempt them because I knew I was already struggling so much with the normal levels. Having to get to these dark stages, oh my god. And the thing is, in the dark levels, the extreme hard levels, you actually have to get more stars to unlock more of the levels in those. So you can get to a point where, you don't have the amount of stars required to get to this stage. Go back to the light levels, complete those, get more perfect ranks to get more stars, then come back to unlock that stage. So it's a completionist nightmare, and I'm happy that I'm not a completionist because I was not going to do that. But it's there if you want more challenge for your buck. So overall, the gameplay of Voxel Wars is it's very fun. I will say, there were times in my Let's Play that I was very frustrated, and I gotta admit, by the end of the game, I was very fatigued and my brain just checked out. I just could not figure out any of the later game stages, and I had to grind to get G tickets in order just to get past it. The boss levels especially, the level 20s on each of the stages, the boss levels can be some of the most intense brain busters ever, and just looking at the footage of doing those boss fights using the hint tickets a lot, I'm looking at them and I'm going, there's no way I could have figured that out on my own. Again though, overall, this game, it is fantastic. The overall game mechanics and how the game plays, it is very fun. If you're looking for a game that will test your brain on strategy and puzzles, this is the game for you. And moving into the music and the audio of the game, again, it's very simple and simplistic, but that's sort of the point. The sound effects are actually very authentic to the movies. Godzilla's atomic breath, King Ghidorah's lightning bolts. A lot of the sound effects are authentic, and then the music of the game is actually really brilliant. I love the music of the game because it's very calm. There are a few tracks that are a little bit more upbeat for like the boss stages or whatever, and then there is just flat out the Godzilla theme that's in the game. But there are also some stages that have music in them that really help you focus. It's focus music, relaxing focus music, which is appropriate for this. So the soundtrack is really great, and I can't wait for someone to rip the tracks so that I can have it as a soundtrack, because it is a really nice, well done soundtrack. And the crazy thing is with this game is that, when playing it, since I was one of the first people that was doing a Let's Play of it, and I can attest to that because as I was uploading my episodes, I was looking at the other YouTube videos that were coming out, and I don't want to toot my own horn, but I'm going to say I was the first person to finish the game in a Let's Play style on YouTube, because as I was playing the game, no one else was getting up to the points I was. And I'm saying in terms of uploading on YouTube. I know there's probably some people that have beaten this game on their own time and they don't post stuff, but I'm saying in terms of trying to, upload a full Let's Play or a playthrough, I'm going to say I was the first one because I didn't see anybody else, and that made the game even harder because we live in an age where when you play a video game, there are walkthroughs day one. There are full playthroughs day one. There are hints and tricks, and sometimes there's cheat codes and things that can help you through the game. Voxel Wars, nothing. I was completely on my own, except for there was one commenter that I asked for help, and he helped me with a few levels to get through them. So I appreciate you, man, in the comments, one of you guys who were helping me through it. But I gotta say, it was a very tough playthrough because there were no walkthroughs, no hints, no anything. I had to really figure it out on my own. One last thing before I move to my conclusion of the game is the game also has a custom creator mode, which is awesome. That means that this game is going to have life after the main game is finished. Players can actually make their own puzzle maps, which is fantastic. But the other great thing about it is you can actually get 3 stars on the community maps and get a G ticket to use in the campaign. So I grinded a bunch of community maps that were very simple ones. They were sort of like your Super Mario Maker style, where they're like, do this one move and then the whole thing will play itself. So it's like, you know, one turn, you do one thing and then the whole game just does this chain reaction, and then all of a sudden you get 3 stars, and it's awesome. So I would say, as a big PSA to the Godzilla Voxel Wars community, please make more exploitable community maps so that while people are trying to finish the campaign, they can actually go and grind some G tickets in the community playlist. That's just my thing there. So that was a really cool feature to the game as well. Overall, to conclude this review, guys, Godzilla Voxel Wars is a good Godzilla game. I can't believe I'm saying it, but we actually have another good Godzilla game on our hands that's an officially licensed game. This is from Toho, who licensed the game out to a developer to create a Godzilla game on his 69th birthday. So I'd say that's a win. It's not the type of Godzilla game I was hoping for, but for what it is, I do think it's good. And also, it's only $15 on Steam so far as I know. I don't know about any other platforms, but for $15 for what this game is, that's a pretty good deal. Again, compared to Rise of Kong on Steam, that was like, what, $30, $40, and it was a dumpster fire. This is a really good deal. So, I do highly recommend going out and buying the game. Not only for being a Godzilla fan, but also if you're a fan of puzzle strategy games. This game will probably be right up your alley. I've also heard that a lot of people compared this game to Into the Breach. I'm not aware of that game, but it sounds like a similar type of volumetric strategy game. So if you liked Into the Breach, then I guess this is good for you too. So yeah. That will do it for my review of Godzilla Voxel Wars, guys. I hope I covered as much as I could in the game, but I'm pretty much now all done with it. I don't really know when I will touch this game again, but I will say for the time that I had with it, it was very good. And again, I'm really happy to say that we do have a good Godzilla game on our hands. So, that's it from me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think of Godzilla Voxel Wars and your experience playing it, if you have. Or if you haven't, let me know if you're interested in getting it. And that'll do it for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, stay big, G fans.